And we've been really busy. So I'm Sid Gordon, I'm the county extension agent. You all know what Cooperative Extension Service is. Okay, we're just kind of an outreach of New Mexico State University. We're fortunate in Otero County, we have an FCS agent, Food and Consumer Science. We have a 4-H agent, not right now, but we're in the process of hiring another one. And we have a county agriculture agent. I'm the county agriculture agent. I got started in my extension career back in 1985. And I worked for extension in 2 states. And then I got into the animal health industry, and I was in private industry for 21 years. I moved back home to my grandfather's place at High Rolls about 2000. And I was still with the animal health industry. And then about 3.5 years ago, after many buy-ups and mergers, I was in middle management and I found myself without a job. Well, I had my master's, I had tenure with New Mexico State University, and the county extension position was open in Lincoln County. And I was kind of getting tired of being on the road, so I was fortunate enough to apply for and get the job as county agriculture agent here in Otero County. So I've been back at it for 3.5 years. A lot of things changed in 21 years. They did. And a lot of them for the better. I wear a lot of hats because of this county is nearly as big as Socorro County. We're the 2nd and 3rd largest acreage county, largest physical size counties in the state. Catherine County being the biggest. So, I don't know if you all know this, we have about 11% deeded land. We have 11% tribal land. And all the rest of that land is either public lands or military reservation. So from an environmental management standpoint, we're limited, right? Except for private landowners, everything we do has to be cleared through some agency or agencies, right? So it's like our forest up here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about weeds, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about fire. Fire-wise has become a big push by extension because of, if you all are aware, you've seen the fires in California. We've had numerous fires up here. Be smart about it. You guys had a big fire here just a couple years ago. So our forestry guy will say he's not a fan of Smoky Bear. And I got to put a caveat on this. My dad retired from the Forest Service in 1984. And he's been on the Lincoln, he's been on forest all over the country. And that was a different era with public land managers than it is today. So the Forest Service has a lot of things on their plate and a lot of different groups that they have to address. Private interest groups, permittees, people may be mining, people may be logging. And what's happened over the years is, and this is a little bit my opinion and not so much fact, public land managers responded to public interest groups and pressures, like our forest. Our forest evolved in the Southwest through fire. We took fire away when we started fighting fire and putting every fire out. Combine that with a whole lot more people living out in little pockets of private land scattered around. And so in some cases we've had to manage fire to keep, or put fire out to keep homes and property from burning. So fast forward several years and we have the situation we have now. Y'all seen the dead trees around Cloudcroft? We had some wet years, trees grew up thick, we didn't thin them, we didn't log them, we didn't have any ground fires. They get up bigger and bigger, they need water. We don't get too terribly much water up here. Average year is like 25 to 30 up here on top, going down to about 10 in the basin. So we go through some years of drought. Those trees get stressed, they get sick. Same thing happens in yards all the time that I look at. Beetles move in, and then we have a bunch of fuel load we got dead trees, and we got brush, and we got understory, and we got duff that thick. So this last summer, I gave a talk at the ranger station at their little speaking series they have once a month. And I talked a little bit about what you can do as homeowners to minimize your risk of fire. Fire control and weed control, unwanted species control go hand in hand. Okay? So maybe one man's weed is another man's feed, right? There's certain weeds that have some value. I'm going to tell you, within the first 5 feet of your house, you ought to have just short grass or maybe dirt. Okay? You really should. And I know there's a lot of cabins up here I go look at. And I saw this as a kid. I graduated from Rio Dosa back in 1980. And people would literally buy a lot and build a house, and they'd build the front porch around the tree they wanted. And that's a whole host of problems. When I moved back here and built a home in James Canyon, my insurance company wouldn't let me have any trees within 15 foot of my house. And I think that's probably smart. Okay. So let's talk about this. I have a home. I have my first 5 feet, and that first 5 feet should be void of anything unless it's short grass that you can mow. Okay. Or flower beds or something you can keep down, because that's ladder fuel to take sparks into your house. And our forestry guy has a really cool video on some of those fires in California that you look at them, none of those yards looked like a fire hazard, right? This was an urban area in some of those areas. But with those high winds and this hot, dry, low humidity that we have, the embers, the sparks were just blowing, millions of them blowing 50 miles an hour. And they were just blown into the vents on houses. Some of them blew under the porches, and they showed how all those caught on fire. Wow. It's really important that you clean up around your house. The other thing is I get a lot of calls, and I've gotten several from up here at Timberon. So now we've had a fire go through, right? We've got some standing dead forage. Now, a few of those trees are sure habitat for wildlife. They are. They're kind of unsightly, but if you want to leave a few, that's fine. One of the successing species that come in after fires are oak brush, right? And we have a lot of those areas where that's really thick. Oak brush will burn really good when it's dry, guys. It has value too. So what I tell people to do is look at your landscape and see what you want to keep. You know, there's a lot of talk of how many trees in a native forest per acre is a healthy number. And you know, there's data that shows 10 to 20 trees per acre. You show me anywhere up here on this forest where there's just 10 to 20 trees per acre. Okay. Our meadows, we're losing them at a rate of 2% a year up here. Combine that with, we have public land users that their allotment has been whacked. Their allotment, the number of head of cattle they can run on a given area has been cut back. Okay. And I love wildlife, but I've worked with our wildlife guy and some other folks, and I've monitored some of these. What we have, we'll put a cage out, an enclosure, so we can say what would grow up in that cage if nothing ate it. The elk are devastating. You make that drive from Cloudcroft to here, there's no vegetation in those meadows, and that's not healthy for our rangelands. So when we improve habitat and reduce fire control, we also increase our ability to accommodate the number of livestock we're allowed, as well as accommodate more wildlife. Because what we do for livestock, generally always, if we're managing it properly, will benefit wildlife. And there was a really good program given here at Cloudcroft a couple months ago called regenerative grazing, using cattle to bring back native grasses. And you can do that, but you have to manage it intensively. We've got public lands. they have restrictions and they have to do NEPA studies and things that take a long time to act. There's going to be a large project started down here. They finally got the things in line called the Southern Sacramento Reclamation Project. I think that's it. And they're going to do a whole combination of things. They're going to probably do some thinning and some logging. They found a pallet company out, I believe Chaparral or somewhere down south on the border with Texas, that's going to come up and take some of that undersized timber. That's the other thing. When our forests get real thick, those trees don't mature to harvestable trees. So you can't get a commercial logging company to come bid on it because it's not profitable for them in this terrain with these big grades and stuff to even thin that and take it when it's a healthy tree, let alone when it's an unhealthy. So they had to find alternative uses for some of our biomass. And I think that's good because I'm a big proponent of prescribed fire. Like I say, I grew up, my dad was in the Forest Service, and he was a big proponent of prescribed fire. Fire can be very helpful as a management tool. We just don't want it rolling up to our back door, do we? So, when you add all these things together, you can do this in your own home environment, right? You can say, okay, I've got my house here, I've got an acre lot, I've got 5 acres. I'm gonna pick my big healthy trees, ones with good tops, no mistletoe in them, right? And pick them in the landscape where I have some space so that they're not so thick that when we do get some moisture, there's enough to sustain those and keep them healthy. So my first 5 feet, I'm gonna clean up really good. Then I'm gonna move out from that, and I'm gonna be very selective with other plants I leave in the landscape. How many knows what daylighting a tree is? Legging one up. So good. So a lot of our juniper, you know what pinyon juniper is versus pine, will have low growing branches. And that's called ladder fuel. I use that term again, ladder fuel. So when you got a nice ground fire moving through, and it gets up to an old gnarly juniper tree, it's got those low branches, it catches the lower branches catch the upper branches, you get it up higher. We get a wind. Once that fire starts to climb, then we can get what's called a canopy fire. So it moves through there. And that's when we get these devastating moonscape fires. It burns everything. If you'll leg those trees up in your landscape, you keep your grass and your weeds under control, nothing else, just mow them. When a fire comes roaring up to your property, if the winds aren't too terribly bad and it sets, stays down on the ground, you can keep that off your home. And you can protect your home without endangering the life of a firefighter camped out there with a spray rig trying to keep it down. You can do a few things that can really minimize your risk. Now look, when we get huge devastating winds like those folks in California get those Santa Ana winds, and they had all that fuel load, and they had thick houses, and had a really poor escape route. So Timberlawn's got really one, but possibly 2 exits, right? You drop off the hill and go down to toward McGregor, or you can go out the way I came in. I think everybody should have an evacuation plan here. I really do. Most of our wind is predominantly southwest, so it's blowing from here to there. If I wanted to leave, depending on where I'm at, part of that you might be trying to outrun it. That's not a very good road, but it's probably a safer alternative if the fires, if you can get behind that fire, you know, upwind from it, okay? So if I pick my landscape out, I went and looked at several homes, and I can do this for anybody here and their property over in, what's that canyon? I get them all mixed up. Anyways, up toward the headwaters of the Pennyasket, okay? And there's all of these drainages, we have these pockets of private land because that's how this country was homesteaded. So when they came in and did the national forest, they excluded these little homesteads in these existing places. And some of those hillsides, they've got really thick with timber. And we were talking about thinning, taking some of those trees down selectively. So what happens when we remove canopy off of a steep hillside? We expose it to erosion, right? So there's kind of a double-edged sword to addressing thinning your trees and not creating more problems. Some of that timber doesn't have a lot of value. Some of it has a little value. I told them, you know, one thing they'll do after a fire is those guys will come in, they'll fell those burnt trees and they lay them with the hill, running with the hill horizontal. And that's to catch debris, slow your runoff down, okay? You can do that with live trees. Bump those branches off when you lay them down. You can pile and burn that or chip it. It's great if you got a chipper because you can throw that organic matter back out there on that hillside. Now, if you get a fire into that, it'll burn kind of slow, but it won't burn like a big torch will burn. But it's great to put organic matter back. And I talk about that constantly throughout the county because, with the exception up here in some of our heavy forested areas, that's one thing we're deficit of, especially out there in the desert. We don't have enough organic matter in the soil. And our soils are pretty high pH. Even up here in the mountains, our water's hard and our soil pH is pretty high. Adding organic matter helps that. You can't change your pH, but you can dilute it a little bit, right? So on those spots where I looked at those people's places that had those big hills behind their house, I said, well, why don't you try just coming in here, getting somebody in here, doing it yourself, and laying some of these down and start going along that hillside and opening it up a little bit. And you can treat it like pruning a tree. I give this talk all the time. How much should I take? Well, it's kind of like a haircut. You can end up like mine, or you can start out slowly, and then you can take a little more. How aggressive you get with this is completely up to you, but remember, when you pick those good, healthy trees, and you get rid of some of their competition, they always do so much better. Because the thicker the trees, all of them are competing for the same water source, right? So if we have too many, we've got a problem. I give the talk all the time on how to water, proper way to water. We can talk a little bit about that. A lot of your places up here are native landscapes, right? How many of you have an improved yard, grass that you're watering? Okay, so how often are you watering on that grass?
According to how much rain you get.
Yeah, how much rain you get, what the time of the
Okay,
year.
and at least you're watching that, because so many people, I'm not going to pick on the city, but a lot of those homes are put in, and the first thing they do is they have somebody come in and put in an irrigation system or a water system. And then they put out new plants, and those builders will set those timers on that water to come on 3 days a week, 15 minutes, because they want to keep that new vegetation healthy. And people buy it, and 6 years later, it's still coming on 3 days a week for 15 minutes. And that is not the way to water. How many has ever had a swamp cooler? Okay? We have those pads in the swamp cooler, and we dribble water through them, and they evaporate, and dribble water, and they evaporate cooler. That's how it works. What do those pads look like after one season? They're just a white rock. That same thing happens on our soil profile when we frequently water. And so I'll tell people, you've got to water deep and infrequently. They say, well, I can't afford that. I say, wait a minute. I'm not necessarily telling you to put more water on. I'm telling you to put more water on at one time, soak that water down, push those salts down, and then do that maybe once a week, especially on established vegetation. Even up here in the hot parts, I live at High Rose, I water my yard every other week. I flood it because I have ditch rights. But I flood it. Okay, so I put it on deep. And I have a cool season grass, a fescue mix, which most of probably you're going to have up here. Bermuda could grow here, but I would imagine you have a cool season mix of some kind. Okay? Once that's established, encourage those roots down. How do you mow? Short or high? About 3 inches, 3.5 would be best. You know, I like a nice groomed appearance for aesthetics, but cutting it too short does two things. The shorter your canopy, the shorter your roots. There's a direct correlation with grasses and forbs with how much canopy and how much roots below the soil. So you shorten the top, you pull the roots up. I tell people, if you water, I don't care if you put on a foot or 2 inches of water, we have a hot, dry wind in June, anytime, that top profile's drying out. So if I put on 2 inches and the top 2 inches dry out, it's gone. If I put on 6 or 8 inches and the top 2 inches dry out, I still got 4 inches of water down there in the root reserve that'll hold that plant, encourage those roots to be deeper, and take it to my next water. Then we come into weeds. The shorter you cut your grass, the better the weeds like it, because they have less competition, right? If you keep your grass up at a decent height, keep it healthy, you can fertilize a little, because the other thing, how many of you bag your grass? Don't bag it. Let that organic matter fall down there. People say, well, I have all this cuttings everywhere. Well, so I still mow my yard every week, even though I'm only watering every other week. And I'm taking off about that much per clip. So you don't even notice it. And that falls back in and we put that organic matter we need back in the soil. It also helps compete out those weeds. So somebody comes in and said, well, I'm watering deep, I'm cutting high, I've got my yard thinned out where it's not overgrown, and I still get a lot of weeds. Well, we have weeds here that with a latent seed bank, meaning your seeds laying there, have been there for years and years, and the weather gets right and then germinate. Look at the basin. We finally got some moisture. We got tansy mustard everywhere out there. We've always had tansy mustard. When I was a kid, we had cattle getting sick on tansy mustard. It's been around a long time. Just spraying a weed and you kill it doesn't mean you've gotten rid of it. It's an ongoing thing. So I'm not opposed to herbicides at all. I have a private applicator's license. I know the science behind herbicides and how they work. And the proper use of a herbicide could be more beneficial to our environment by getting rid of invasive plants than doing nothing at all. But the wrong use of any pesticide is wrong. And it causes multiple problems. It causes resistance. People use it wrong. You can get exposure. You can get off-site contamination. How many of y'all heard about all the press about Roundup right now? Right? Look, Roundup, the active ingredient is glyphosate. So it's glyphosate. It's really smart technology. That herbicide will not have any activity on the ground or in the water. We have an aquatic version of it called rodeo that we can spray ponds with. It doesn't kill fish, doesn't hurt anything. But it binds, the molecules of glyphosate bind with the water or soil molecule. And that keeps it from rain coming down and pushing it somewhere else and killing plants you don't want to kill. It also is what is called a contact herbicide, meaning it has to make contact with the plant to kill it. So it has no soil activity or anything else, but it's non-selective, right? It's not a broadleaf herbicide that just kills broadleaves and leaves your grasses alone. It'll get most species, not all of them. There's lots of things Roundup doesn't get. But if it's in your yard, it's going to kill about everything there. That's the way it works. So if you use it carefully and judiciously and read the label, you can use it safely. Is it carcinogenic? Absolutely. And it's always said that on it. This could be a problem. Do not come in contact with your eyes, skin, wear protective gloves, whatever. It's always said that. But now there's a lot of bad press about it could be carcinogenic. Well, they never said it wasn't. Most pesticides are not good for you to get on your skin or to ingest or get in your eyes. Okay? So use it carefully. Any herbicide. We spray for a lot of the thistle up here that's so invasive. And that product is a broadleaf selective herbicide. It's very effective on thistle. But it requires a private applicator's license or a commercial applicator if you're doing it for somebody else to put that product on. I had an individual from Cloudcroft call me. They had some solar panels and they wanted to get rid of everything that was out there. I said, well, why don't you just leave that native grass, because you have good standard, great native grass growth, and just keep it mowed. It's not going to interfere with your satellites, and you're holding that soil. And the best weed control, have something growing there you want, so you don't have something you don't want. And native grasses are wonderful. Well, you want to get rid of it. You want to scrape it off. And I said, look, I mean, if you're gonna do it, you go in there and without disturbing the soil, you can just spray Roundup on it, top kill it, leave that vegetation on the ground and not leave a scar. Nope. She'd heard about Roundup, said it was horrible. I said, well, do you have a lot of thistles? She said, oh no, don't have any thistles. I already had those sprayed. So she was perfectly all right with allowing somebody to come spray her thistles, but she didn't want to spray glyphosate out there on that grass. So, I mean, that's, to me, that's a little bit, I can sure respect somebody who says, I don't want to use herbicides, period. Okay. It's a lot of work, but we can sure get after it and make it happen. Okay. But to be selective, to say, this herbicide's okay, and this one's not, it's a little confusing because all those are FDA approved. Now, in the past, has FDA made some mistakes? Absolutely. There's products that we don't have on. Most of the organophosphates are gone from the market, right? We don't have those anymore. All I'm saying is herbicides are an option if you use them right, but you got to use them right. Because if you don't use them correctly, you have resistance problem with the herbicides, you expose yourself to unnecessary dangers, and more importantly, a lot of people, we get off-site contamination. There's a product called 2,4-D. It's a common broadleaf herbicide. You used to buy it over the counter. Still can in some states, but not in New Mexico. Because over by Goober Gulch at Portales, people were using it so flagrantly, they were killing peanuts. Homeowners were killing peanuts. So they pulled that product off the market from an over-the-counter product and made you get a private applicator's license to buy it. And it's an effective herbicide, and it works great. I go out and use it around my place to get rid of broadleaf so I don't hurt the grass. I don't spray very often. If you are going to spray, timing's everything. I don't know how many people in the last week or two have come in with mustard or some cool season broadleaf that's already got a head on it, and they want to kill it. It's too late. Don't waste the money. Don't waste the herbicide. You take care of weeds when they're young. You take care of brush as much as you can when it's young. Okay? Because it requires less herbicide and you're more effective with how you get rid of it. So timing's everything. And just one herbicide doesn't take care of everything you want either. You need to know what weeds you're going after, and then if you know it or don't know it, bring it by the office. We'll figure out what it is, and then we will select a herbicide that will best work for that. Okay? If you don't have a private applicator's license, we'll try to find an over-the-counter herbicide that you can use that might be effective. But down there in the basin, we have African rue. I don't know if you guys see this. It's that little, it almost looks like a succulent. It's got a little white flower. It's a cool season perennial. It's got a taproot that goes on forever. It's amazing. It loves drought. It is extremely poisonous. Nothing usually eats it because it's so noxious. But it's taken over, and it's from Africa. It came into dimming back in the 50s on those landing mats that they use in other countries to land airplanes on that lock together. You'll see some of the pins and corrals built out of that stuff up here in the mountains. Great building material. They got it started in dimming, and it's all over southern New Mexico, southern Arizona, clear down. I saw it in Fort Stockton, Texas. You can only control it with a product called imazapyr, and that is a restricted use pesticide, but you have to have a license. And it's very hard to control. And so the county's disc it, it's mowed it, and it loves that. It can reproduce vegetatively, like Bermuda grass. So when they came in and disc it up, they just had a little bit, now they got a whole bunch. I'll have people sometimes, if they can't get somebody to come spray and they don't have a license, I'll have folks sometimes go in and cut the blossoms off so it doesn't, it's got a little pod on it, it's got these little black seeds in it. And I've seen it clear over and on the cornucopia at about 6,500 feet. So it's not just a desert plant. And what happens is we bring it in on the equipment. So I've worked tirelessly with the county to blow their equipment off before they move to another site. Because they bring those mowers and those graders, and they grade a road down here, and they go grade a road up there, or they grade a road up here that has it, and they grade on down the road, and you can see it all along our roads. It's coming off of tires, and it's coming off of equipment. And then it spreads out into the pastures and the environment. The reason I digress to talking about African rue is there's certain plants that if you have an issue with them, mechanical may or may not be an option, and you may not be able to buy a herbicide that'll work the way you want. So let's back up here to our home again. We've got our first 5 feet just cleaned up. We move out further into our landscape. We've got our trees and maybe some brush. How many of you have a little oak in your landscape? I like it. I don't have a problem with it. But I will keep it pocketed or use it as a hedge. Okay? If you have, when I've seen some of these lots out here that after that fire, it just came back with a vengeance and they're nearly solid oak. That needs to be cleared. And you can mechanically get after oak and be pretty successful. And depending on how big of an area, you know, when we do range improvement, mechanical is an option, but it's very expensive. Have you all seen the mastication work they do? They have these big grinders on the front of a rig, and they mow, and they'll go through that PJ and oak. Yuck! I don't care what's in the way. He grinds it up, and he'll grind a tree that big and spits it out into these chips. And that can be effective. The problem is there's a lot of species that are re-sprout. So our one-seeded, our curly bark juniper that we have, there's one down there. And then next to it, the little bluer looking one, the two-seeded juniper that's called alligator because it has that real distinct bark. If I cut that curly bark below the lowest branch, it's done. It's not coming back. If I cut a pine tree off, it's done. It's not coming back. Spruce, fir, I cut those off, they're done. If I cut that alligator juniper off, it's coming back. If I cut that oak off, it's coming back, right? So some species, mechanical removal is not really an option because it'll re-sprout. And what happens when you re-sprout is you used to have a canopy this big and the root system that maintained it. So I whack it off, I still got the same root system, right? So even if I want to go put a herbicide on it, it's not going to work because I don't have as much canopy as I had before. Plus I got this little stump and all these roots trying to tell the tree to live, and it sends up multiple stems, right? It starts all over again. So it comes back rather quickly. So on your landscapes that you want to do some, I'll say aggressive type rehab to, mechanical could work, but you got to repeat it, right? Sometimes you got to repeat herbicides. Like I said, one time does not get it. So then you get it down, and I like how I got it. I got rid of some of my really species I don't want. What do I want to have growing back there? Because I don't like bare ground. Bare ground's not healthy for anything. Turning up the soils, if we don't have to, is really not healthy because it releases all these carbons. And the big catchphrase now is carbon sequestering. Anyway, keeping carbon in the soil. Okay? That's a big deal. It really is. So, what about native grass? You've got several species with the rainfall you have here in this area that'll do well. If you get them up, keep the elk in. But they're a good choice. And I can mow those, right? So at ranch camp, we teach the kids on range management to take half and leave half. So if I'm going to graze a pasture, I'm going to remove half of the canopy, and I'm going to rotate my cattle or sheep or whatever I got to somewhere else, but I'm going to leave half behind. You've got to have that ground cover. So in your yard, if you get out there and mow it at 3 to 4 inches, you'll eventually kill it. So during the wet season, let it grow up, let it set up fluorescence, let it put a seed head on it. That's healthy. And then it'll start storing carbohydrates in its root system for the next year. And then I have a bunch of side oats grama out to the west of my house. And I have horses, but I keep them off that because they're like goats. They would have it devastated. It would be void of vegetation. I'll turn them out once in a while, but I don't let them eat it down, okay? But after first frost, what do? I go out there with brush hogging, not let all that stuff fall on the ground. Throw some seeds around. It gets rid of the fire hazard, and it holds moisture in the soil. So you can manage your native landscapes to where they're aesthetically pleasing without saying, well, you know, I don't want a fire hazard, or I don't, this looks ugly. I mean, you can do some things. We had a whole workshop, at the Master Gardeners about 4 months ago on just using native grasses in your landscape. You know, ornamentals. How many of you seen giant saccatone? You'll see it in these bottoms. It gets real rank, and it's thick leafed, and it grows in big clumps. And every once in a while, we'll burn that off in the spring, so cattle can come in there and utilize it because they won't when it's coarse. I got a friend in Demi, and he's got that put along his concrete ditches. Doesn't water it; it's growing there on its own, and it's like pampas grass. It's gorgeous. And you can come in there in the winter and whack that off if you're worried about fire hazard next spring, and let it all regrow. And it's a native grass. And you don't have to water it. So pick junipers and pines for your trees in your yard up here. You don't have to water them. They'll survive on the amount of water you have here, as long as they're not too thick and sucking all the water out of the ground together. Also, when you have a lot of cover, a lot of canopy, and you get a lot of shade, that limits how well your grass is going to grow. Okay? Even cool season grasses that like a little shade, they won't grow as well there as they will in full sunshine, especially at this elevation. So one thing I want to entertain to you is, so at the office I give people pointers on how to take soil samples, where to take your water down the border, have it tested if you need to. Water conservation is a big push of mine. I think it's our most limiting resource here. When Alamogordo can invest in a desalination plant, and they can make that feasible, we know we got water problems. Okay? Because that's extremely expensive to do that. I know the history a little bit on the water system here. I know it's got a lot of leaks. I know it has issues. Water's a big deal, right? So, I mean, we talked about how agricultural water availability is going down, aquifers are going down. What about just having a drink of water and flushing the moat? A lot of people take that for granted. We don't here in the Southwest, because most of us have dealt with it. I have some homes up above me on West Side Road. They hold their water. Their wells that won't exist, or they're so weak they can't keep up, except when we have some really high moisture times. It's a big deal. So how you water, how you maintain your landscape will help you keep weeds out, help you keep fire danger out. If any of you have, say, hey, can you come by and look at my place and give me some pointers? Absolutely, I can do that. I try to group them up because as I get further in the season, I get busier. But I came up here and looked at 3 or 4 homes after that talk at the ranger station. And we talked specifically about their grass and how to manage their overforest problem, too many tree problems. But that's what we provide. If you have questions on, I get questions on, I got skunks, I got squirrels, what's that?
Rabbits.
Rabbits have been a big deal the last couple of years because that population's escalating.
Yes.
Exclusion, right? With dogs, good dogs. 410 up here, you can get away with that. Can't in Alamogordo, which you can't here. But those populations will got a lot of coyotes right now. Get rid of the rabbits because that's a lot. There's coyotes can be a problem for some of my ranchers too. But I mean, it's a population swing, and we see this especially with rabbit populations. They'll escalate, and then they usually get a disease. We drop that population way down. I got ground squirrels, of course. I got skunks and coons and everything. I've got gray squirrels burrowing under the tack room, burrowing in the house. They bowl in the attic. I mean, they're everywhere. We've got some good flyers on trapping and how to control those, manage those. Gophers, I get called on gophers all the time. But gophers are the best example, right, to plug in right here because most gopher mount colonies is usually one female and her babies. And here, usually one, sometimes they'll have 2 litters a year. They don't hibernate, they're not active in the winter, they're They eat and live underground. But if I catch that female out, and before she has babies and get her out, I can get rid of my gopher problem for a little while. But gophers are opportunists. When those populations, just like the rabbits, when those populations come out, they kick some babies out, they wander out looking for a home, they come across an old tunnel system, they'll move in. So you'll get them back. And they've got them horrible bad in some of the areas in Alamogordo. My wildlife specialist did a whole workshop with the city parks trying to get rid of them. And those guys have been trapping gophers for a while. But Dr. Smallage is just like a gopher machine. We set out traps and I had 2 caught before the meeting started. But they had lots of gopher problems. So pest management's a big thing we do. ID on a lot of stuff, trees, grasses, weeds. Bring that in. I am not the best at that, but we have the whole resources of the university to send it off. A lot of insect issues, insect management in the home and in the garden. You can give me a bug, I can get it ID'd, and we can figure out a way to go after it. A lot of those kind of things, we have an entomologist called Dr. Carol Sutherland. She's outstanding. She works for us and the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. Super bright lady. I mean, if you played stump the chumps with her, you would not win. She is just amazing at her ability to ID a wide variety. She's been doing this for 30 years here. But a lot of times she'll send me back a report to say, you know, that's a whatever beetle. It's going to cycle. It's not doesn't do a lot of damage. Population will go down in a few weeks. You can leave it alone, or you can go try to spray it. Aphids, you know, sometimes they can be a real issue. Sometimes it's just a matter of hosing them off and giving it time. A lot of people like to use home remedies. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they can help. I have people that want to trap skunks and get rid of them, but they don't want to kill them. So they want to haul them off and make them, 1, somebody else's problem, and 2, skunks are notoriously bad for rabies. I even give rabies to my horses. Trapping a skunk or any rodent or varmint you want to get rid of, and re-releasing it is making it, 1, somebody else's problem, but more importantly, it increases the chance of spreading disease. So they trap them in Alamogordo and they haul them up around my house or somewhere up here and kick them out. That's stupid. You're introducing the same species of animal from a completely different population into a population it hasn't never been to, and it may have a whole host of something that the other population had never been exposed to until you did. So I tell people, either live with the skunk or get rid of it and destroy it. Because that don't want to kill animals. You know, we're starting to get a really big feral horse problem up here, especially as you go toward the tribe. Estimated 5,000 head of feral horses on the reservation.
Mustangs?
What's that?
Are they Mustangs?
Well, some people call them Mustangs, and that, yes ma'am, you can call them that. Horses are a non-native species to the United States. They all are descendants of Spanish horses and or domestic horses over the last 500 years since they first were introduced to the Americas. And what has happened is, I remember when I was younger, you know, they would control them and they'd have roundups. And, some of that time when I was in Oklahoma, I had guys that used to run a lot of yearling cattle. We would sell medicine. Well, now they run horses for the government. Thousands of horses. We're paying money to have them housed until they die out on grass. So they're trying very hard to manage the population, but they're not making a dent in the breeding population. They reproduce about 25 to 35% a year, and that's turned out for a while. Okay, those numbers. A lot of people want to use sterilization as an option, and that would be a good option. The problem is, can you imagine trying to find every feral stud on the Mescalero Reservation, 11% of the size of the landmass of our county, and effectively it takes 2 shots of a drug that will cause sterility, right? So that's a nice concept, but it's not a practical one. but again, that's a situation where animals were just let go and we don't have any check on them. We control our wildlife through hunting, we control our cattle through the number of animal units a producer has to turn out, but we don't touch wild horses. And I'm not gonna get off on my wild horse bandwagon, but it's another example of a species that needs to be checked. And my dad told me once, it's not preservation, it's conservation. So we have to figure out a way to have that balance up here. The right amount of trees, the right amount of grass. People gotta live here, wildlife gotta live here, livestock are gonna live here. But as the population of the world grows, you realize by 2050, we'll have to produce twice as much food as we produce today. So a lot of people have concern about corporate ag and GMOs, and we produce at the level we produce at because of smart technology in agriculture. And organic farming is great, but to replicate that on a large scale, to feed that many people with the available resources we have, land and water and land really, number one, and two, would be very hard. So we come up with a soybean that we identify the gene that glyphosate kills, we take that gene out and we replace it with another gene. Now that grain is genetically modified. We can go plant that soybean, and when the weeds come up in it, we just go over the top of it with glyphosate, kill the weeds, doesn't hurt the soybean. You shouldn't be concerned that the plant was genetically modified. You should be concerned that, is there any repercussions to having glyphosate sprayed on a seedling plant that I'm going to eventually eat the bean off? And studies have shown no, there's not. But people automatically want to use this new catchphrase of genetically modified. Everything we do in agriculture is genetically modified. Improved breeds of plants, whether we did it the way we do it now in the laboratory, which is much quicker, or like they did when I was a kid, you'd have 2 rows of corn and you wanted to crossbreed them, you'd cut the tassels off one and it would propagate the other. So that you would get a crossbred, a genetically modified kind of corn. Okay? Well, technology's come a long way. They don't hire college students to go out there and cut corn anymore. They can do it in the lab. So all these things that we have to deal with in our environment today affect us. But I always tell people, you can make the first start in your backyard, especially with fire and weed control and water use. That's a big deal. You can have a nice place while still being green. And that's not some circles I run in, that's a dirty word. It's not, being green is not a bad thing. Okay? We all need to look at that. Is there any questions? Okay.
I've had a lot of locusts on my property, and it's awful trying to get rid of them.
Honey locust or what do you?
Black
locust? Yeah. Okay. And so black locust is a lagoon like alfalfa. We used to plant it in Oklahoma for erosion control because it fixes its own nitrogen. But it can be a weed in that situation.
Oh, it's horrible.
So you can grub it. You can grub it out. How big are the trees?
Well,
Or
kept
just the
it pretty-
bushes?
pretty down because I dig them out with a pick.
Okay.
And pull up
There you
that-
go. You grub it. Okay.
Root, but they
So
does come back because they're out
sure.
all around my
And you
property.
still got some viable roots, and you got some viable seed. I can. We'll get names and numbers and stuff, and I'll look up what would be effective for that. So it's kind of like mesquites. Mesquites are, and they're miserable. I hate them in rangeland. But when people say, "Well, what's a good tree I can plant in Alamogordo that I don't have to water?" Prune up your mesquites. They make a pretty decent tree. Not great, but you don't have to do anything to it. Keep it pruned once in a while. You can leave a few of those locusts selectively, and they're not a bad tree because locust is actually, they can be very beneficial to the soil. The problem is if you got too many of them and they're spiny and they're nasty, you don't want them in your landscape.
Thorns that long.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Another plant that's learned how to evolve. But yeah, we'll get you something to put on that if you want to go that route. If you don't want to go the herbicide route, seek and destroy
Well,
while
I
you're doing
just
it.
keep doing that because.
And so what will happen when you remove that canopy and stay after it, eventually you deplete the carbohydrate reserves in the roots. And so then it won't come back. But that takes a while, guys. I mean, some people have done that with the rue. Every time it pops up, they chop it, chop it, and chop it. And eventually, but that root system is so big, and then it'll pop up somewhere else too. And that's what your locust will do. But if you're just super diligent, you can eventually exhaust it. But it's not an easy task. That's why maybe the proper herbicide that goes into the plant works into the root system. Because you can top kill things with a lot of products.
Yeah.
But top killing it is just like going out there and chopping it. You didn't get the roots. One of the complaints about glyphosate was, well, it didn't work. It did work. And when it first came out, it would take 10 days to 2 weeks before you'd see that plant start to yellow, eventually desiccate, and all of a sudden it's gone. But you looked at it for a week and said, I didn't do anything to that weed. Yeah, you did. But what you want is a slow kill. It's more effective. And you get the roots. 2,4-D, when I spray I have London Rocket really bad out around the orchard. I have to be really careful because I've got trees there, right? I spray it, it'll wilt that afternoon. It'll wilt that afternoon and start showing signs. But there's been 2 or 3 times, and the agent waited too long to spray, the weeds were a little big, and they came back. But it burned them. I mean, they looked, I got it, I felt good. Saw them guys curling up, right? You want it to move and get into that root system. And we'll find something that we can use. You can use spike pellets that work quite well, and they'll get broadleaves, they'll get trees, brush, they won't hurt your grasses if you want to go that route. You have to get and the other thing is, if you want to get a private applicator's license, I can show you how to take it online through the Municipal Park Medical. $15. And you have to renew it every 5 years. And I'll have a program, and I'll send out and say, hey, you can get 5 continuing ed hours if you come to my pistachio workshop. You can go learn about pistachios and herbicides, and you're good to go for another 5 years. Or you can do like some of my guys do, and they just get on every 5 years and retake it. But you can get that so that you can buy some of these herbicides that will get rid of some of these invasive species you can't manage with over-the-counter products. But you're going to get educated on herbicides and how to dispose of containers and how to use them and the risk involved with them, so you're more educated than the homeowner that runs down the Lowe's, buys weed killer. I said, well, what did you get? Well, I got that. And they give me a trade name. I said, no, that's the trade name. What was the active ingredient? He said, I don't know, I didn't read it. And that's why we have problems. So, fertilizing your yard, do any of you that have grass put a little fertilizer on it? Just a little bit, and that's fine. But think of this, when you don't bag your grass, it's like a crop. When I grow a crop, I go in and I harvest it, and I take something away, and none of that gets back to that soil, right? So I robbed those nutrients from that soil bank to grow that plant in my crop. Grass is no different. If we take the clippings off and if I make hay with it, if it doesn't get to go back to that soil, we got to put a little something back. So you can minimize your fertilizer if you don't bag. You get a good organic cover. A lot of work done today with what's called microorganisms that you throw on the soil. Healthy soil needs all that stuff. It needs cover. It needs worms. You need to pick it up and smell it. And it needs healthy microorganisms. And one thing fire does when it burns really bad, it makes all the above. And we get what's called hydrophobic soil. It means it can't take water anymore. But a nice low grass fire can burn across, re-release some of those nutrients. It didn't get hot enough to hurt the microorganisms, and that kind of rejuvenates it. So fire can be very beneficial used right, or completely devastating if it's out of control.
So what's the best way to replenish the fire ground that's
So-
been baked?
And that's a very good question. So if I can't burn, because that's our biggest problem with burning here, we like to do some spring burns, maybe some early summer burns for most effective, to get the desired effect we want from fire. Well, how many burn days do we have in March and April? The red flag days. We couldn't do a prescribed fire if we wanted to. So let's try to mimic that. I can go in there and mow it, right? And I can re-release all that stuff and let it come down. If I've got some woody heavy species, I need to get rid of those. I need to address them. Because even out on the Dreger Range, there's a spot where the creosote bush looks like out in the basin. Stuff smells so good after it rains. It's kind of, to me, I'm colorblind, but it's kind of a reddish colored leaf and has a little yellow blossom on it. It can be invasive. Its roots are like salt cedars. They secrete a substance that limits other plants growing. Fire came through there, it's about 10 miles in and burned off an area. It was great. It did not come back from fire. Some species won't. Other species will. Salt cedars will come back, mesquites will come back. They'll all come back from their root. So get your plants that you know if I lob them or if I just burn across it easy, they're going to come back. So I'm going to get those out. And you say, I can't do a little backyard burn, so I'm going to mow it. And I'm going to get that stuff down. And I like to do that in the fall so that stuff will be breaking down and maybe we get a little winter moisture and help that decompose. And I'm a big fan of livestock waste, manure. People say, manure brings in seeds. We have seed. We have seed. We have a latent seed bank. So if we take care of our soil and our desirable species, we'll compete out some of those weeds. But we're not going to get rid of the weeds. They'll hang around for 20 years until they get the opportunity. So we'll try to mimic it. It's the best we can do.
What do you do on a lot of our lots that we burn? Really
Right.
bad, and it's hydrophobic.
Hydrophobic. It's like a hydrophobic wood. Meaning it won't take water. It won't
Right.
take water.
How do you
Bring it back.
that soil? Or
So
bring that
so
soil
what
back?
the number one thing we're lacking there is organic matter and micronutrients. And on a small lot, you can buy. I did it in my house. I bought some of that bacteria and just spread it out there like fertilizer. I would bring in as much organic matter as I could. I'd either, if it's a solid black lot, I'd put manure on about that deep. Okay? You betcha. Because people think about this, that breaks down to about that. That's not much of a minute. We have sterilized that soil. We've got to try to bring it back. I try not to mechanically, maybe a year or two in after a lot of organic matter, I might incorporate that. But what happens every time we flip soil? We release carbons. So if I can get something growing there without that, I'm going to. But if there's such a hard pan that no matter how much organic matter I put on, I can't get stuff to take or get water to penetrate, then I might kill it. But what you can do on a small lot, if I bring in enough organic matter, chip up any brush you got, put those out there. Put a little nitrogen out there on that because the decomposition process requires nitrogen. So if I give it just a little, to help that process, it breaks that down, and then guess what? When that's decomposed, then it's available to your plants. So I put out a little bit of organisms, mycorrhiza or some microorganisms, put on a lot of organic matter. Over time, if I get something growing, that soil profile will break and go down. And the roots will go down. That's why deep roots are so important, because all that bacteria travels down those roots. And when you pull up a grass and you see the little things down there on the roots, you know it's healthy. When they got shallow roots, it's not healthy. And there's no microorganisms growing on it. So you can recreate it. You can bring it back. Depending on how much grade you have, you want to stabilize that. Because if you just load that on there and we get a July event with 2 inches of rain, it's going to be somewhere downstream or downgrade from that. Okay? But you can build that back with time. You absolutely can. Keep in mind all that organic matter. What does a compost heap do? Smokes. It's heat. What happens when fire gets into manure? Smokes, burns really slow. So we can keep a big fire down, but that doesn't mean you've stopped fire with all that organic matter. It's good to have, but it's like the duff in the forest. That's some of the hardest stuff to get out because it burns slow and crawls underneath there. And then 5 days later, they got a hot spot again. The guys are back out there on it. So we need it, but it still has flammable potential. Okay, it's something we would have to manage.
Like what's on the scrub oak, making hedges in certain places and
Right.
having little pockets, but if you want to clear a section, just cutting it and keep coming back. And if
So,
you keep doing that.
as much as
don't
I
know.
hate this, mechanical removal, rub it out. Skid steer or something. Now, that's gonna tear up your soil, and it's gonna break up your ground. Have something ready to go on top of it. A bunch of organic matter, get ready to reseed. And I tell everybody, when you're planting here, even down in the desert, well, we like to plant our warm seasons in the spring, grasses or plants, and our cool seasons and our trees in the fall, right? Because that gives them, for those types of plants, that's the best planting time. At our elevation, even at 4,500 feet down the basin, use the monsoons. So if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna get that prepped in June. I'm gonna get my organic matter out there, and I might even throw some seed out and let it be sitting there. And then when it starts raining, if I can keep it there and not move, I'm gonna use Mother Nature to help me get it to sprout, because that's the hardest problem we have, is getting establishment. In areas where they get a lot of rain or they got a lot of water you can run on it, it's much easier. It's not so much an option here. So utilize the season. So time it with that.
You mentioned earlier about soil samples. Do you have a lab here in this county?
We don't have a lab at New Mexico State.
Where you gotta send your samples?
So I have a list of labs you can send them off to.
Okay.
And so soil samples are really easy. If I have a garden or if I have a pasture, I take several plugs from that area. It needs to be about that big around, about that long. I use a shovel, and then I just chop off a little long cube. I remove all the vegetation, right, because I just want the dirt, and I put that in a bucket. And I do that about a dozen, depending on the size of what I'm testing, about a dozen times. And I stir that up. I bring 1 pint of that, and I have a list of labs. You put it in a bag, and you put on there, I want to grow grass, or I want to grow alfalfa, or whatever it is you're going to plant, and they will send back an analysis. I've been looking at the con analysis lately. And they'll tell you, for this crop, this is your pH, this is your dissolved solids, this is your NPK. There's 3 numbers on a fertilizer bag, right? Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the 3 big ones. But it'll also tell you trace minerals of copper and selenium and zinc. For certain crops, that stuff's important. We may need a little phosphorus, we may need a little potassium, depending on where you're at. If I'm gonna grow something, I know I always need a little nitrogen. It's the other reason I like manure. It doesn't have a lot, but it has some manure. And quite frankly, the stronger, the more ammonia, the more urine that's in it, the more nitrogen you get. Okay? Good old dry horse apples, they're good organic matter, but they are not gonna help amend your soil a whole lot. They're gonna give you some good organic matter, but just a little bit of fertility. And we have the list, and all that literature that you guys, if you're interested, it's all free. We're a clearinghouse for information.
Steer manure that you buy. Is that okay?
Yeah, and it's sterilized. Sterilized steer manure. Now, how they knew it came from a steer and a heifer, I don't know. It's sterilized steer manure.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. That's good because they heat that up in the decomposition process, and that'll kill a lot of your weeds. That's why they use the term sterilized. Do the same thing in your backyard. If you have a mound, so some of those big dairies I used to call on down by Cruces, they have rows of that manure. They even compost their cows with it. They get a dead cow, they drop her in there, and she gets chopped up. She's fertilized. The heating process of breaking it down kills the seed. You can do that. I'm telling you, there's some seeds that will pass through the digestive system of a ruminant or a monogastric like a horse, come out the back end and still be viable. Some seeds, like mesquites, they like to scarify that seed, and it makes it even better. You drop it into a nice moist medium, and it sprouts. There's a lot of that stuff gets, you're not gonna see corn pop up, because they've sucked all the food in there. So some of those weed seeds are getting, taken care of through the digestive system. Some don't. I just, people get so much heartburn about, oh, I don't want the weeds. Weeds are there, I'm telling you, they're there. The weeds are there. Unless it's a spot where you just got that soil hydrophobic from a bad fire. It got rid of the seed too.
Well, I was just wondering if the manure, the steer manure, would be good on your grass.
So it can, but you don't want big clumps. And, you know, it's like I tell people, it's what you can tolerate or differently. Because we're not just gonna put a little out, you put it on about that thick. Horse manure is great, because it'll break down really quick. I put it on all my yard, just where I take my cleanings out, and I just pick an area and just keep moving around. Let it break down during the winter, come up, but it would be fine. You have a question?
Yeah, my son is the golf course manager here.
Yes.
And we did a pretty good job. I'm his only volunteer, and we did a pretty good job on dandelions and thistles last year. But we've got a few weeds that we don't know what they are and how to take care of them.
So you brought me one, somebody brought me one that almost looked like a vine, very just long.
I got a picture.
And I sent it off, they didn't know what it was. So give me a fresh sample again, and I'll shoot it off, and I'll try it again. Does it ever have a bloom on it?
Yeah, it has a small little pinkish white.
When does that come on?
Comes on late spring.
Okay, bring it to me with the flower. So on ID, you would think, well, people come in and say, you know, what's that little weed you got? A little white blossom. It's all over. I said, well, I don't know. You think, well, you know, it's all over. And here's the thing. We've got, weeds are so, it's like the mustard family and the sunflower family. They're huge, huge families. And sometimes the only way we can distinguish what they are is with that blossom. So let's try that again, because we really stumped them.
How do I get it to you?
Bring it in. Last time they brought me a bunch of soil. I don't need the soil, just the plant with the bloom on it. Put it in a baggie, because that'll keep it moist.
Yeah.
Don't bring it on a Friday, because it'll get stuck in the mail. Bring it sometime during the week, and we'll shoot it off.
So
And I'll send it to Dr.
Give me
Beck.
a place to, where do I need to bring it?
Just to the office. I'm sorry, to the
Where-
extension office.
where is-
So we are located at the fairgrounds, that big parking lot that's out there. Pull into it. We're on the west end. You'll see our door. Our office is on the right. Extension office is on the left. Bring it in. We'll get it sent off. And that, like I said, that's pretty good.
Somebody told me that y'all have like students or something that can come out and like help out, or
That would really be cool. I wish we did. Because right now we are shorthanded, and I'm running late today.
Yeah.
No, we don't. Extension doesn't have it. So we have on the South Central Mountain Project,
Yeah.
there's a group called Eco Servants. And they'll have a bunch of late high school, early college students. We're going to train them on ID on a certain number of weeds, so we can track what's here now. After we do this clearing, what's coming in. Now we are not going to make range cons out of them in one day, but we will give them, and we have some GPS equipment and this is all done through the NRCS office. They got the grant to do this. All we're going to do is Dr. Young and I are going to give them, okay, here's some things you need to watch for here. Here's some things, there's another project down in Marucci Canyon, kind of about where I'm at there at High Rose. And we're going to say, what's coming in? And it's got erosion, it's got all kinds of things. So when we get through cleaning that up, and we open it up, right? We open up our forest around here, what do we have coming back? And you're always going to have a mixture of some desirables and some undesirables. And after a fire, a normal fire, you'll have a succession of weeds that they pretty well, they don't know all of them, but they know pretty much how the sequence is going to go. Oak's going to come back. I don't know if it's goldenrod or one another weed comes back real common, and then it starts dying. And slowly the native grasses start coming back. But what we're trying to map is there any invasives coming in after we do these treatments? And we'll use them as scouts, because we just need the manpower. But no, we don't have. And some organizations will do that, get scouting. Sometimes the 4-H kids have done projects. You know, it's harder and harder. I mean, kids, man, they don't have time to do anything. 4-H, sports, school, and they can't miss so many days of school, which is good. I'm not complaining. But my point is getting young people to volunteer, to have the time to volunteer, it's very hard. They usually target, a lot of these eco-servants they may be go on and get a degree in agronomy or range, or they go to the Peace Corps. This is something they want to do, and they pay them to do that. They pay them to do it. And the grants fund that, but it's nothing to do with our office. Let's figure out what that weed is though, because I want to try again. That really, really bothered me.
Yeah, it takes over an area, it just spreads.
When I first thought it was dodder, and dodder's kind of a vine that grow on top of other, but it's not. It's a completely different deal.
Yeah.
So let's figure out what it is. Golf course, that's a good segue. You know, talked about water deep, cutting high. Can't do that on a playing field, athletic field, or a golf course, right? You'd be in the rough all the time. So to manage those, it takes a lot more input. It takes more water, it takes more weed control, and it takes more nutrients, right? You can't keep vegetation at that height, even if it's the right variety, consistently, because a plant was designed to grow, set a fluorescence, reproduce, right? That's why we can whack something and it'll still send up a little seed head. That's the plant's way of perpetuating itself. It's propagation. And those little seed heads will be viable. So just mowing your weed seed off, well, it can kind of knock it down, but it won't keep those plants from doing that. So when we get in a golf course situation, your guys' efforts are escalated to make it look good and keep it healthy. And water's probably the biggest factor. Usually is. Any questions?
Little comment. Speaking of those seeds that pass through a system, back in Illinois, our farm back there, I had the city haul their city sludge out in my field. And of course they do it after they take the weed off, they try to haul it liquidly.
Yeah, we did that in Oklahoma, knifed it in.
Yeah, and then they also do it liquidy. It's faster and cheaper for them to get rid of it that way than the fall after we get everything else out. But anyway, what I always find interesting is after they come out and they apply this is after it's been through the digesters and everything. Tomatoes, tomato plants, like crazy. I mean, so it's been through the system. Everybody's system,
Went
it's
through them on a
been
gas
through the
station, went
digester.
through us.
Tomatoes will just still grow.
And many will. And you can definitely introduce some seeds or weed seed into your area using raw manure, okay? But the best thing to do, if you don't want to do that, most people are trying to get rid of their manure. Have a spot if you can get it downwind from you. Pile that up and let it sit for a couple of years and then put it out. Because by then, that's going to break down. And you won't necessarily get rid of 100%, but you're controlling a lot. You can go buy the manure that's already had that process done at the stores. And for square foot gardening, that's great. Especially for square foot gardening because you've got a small area and you don't want to introduce weeds. But it's not too hard to pull those weeds out when they're young and control some of that. But it's not practical. You know, if I got a yard, and I don't have a huge backyard, it's bigger than this room. Fixing part of that, and it's kind of in an L. And I've shrunk it down because I don't want to spend water on grass, and I don't like mowing. But guys, that takes, I mean, when we do an amendment on pasture land, it's tons per acre. Tons per acre, okay? So scale that down to square feet, it's still quite a bit of product to improve it, right? A little bit's not gonna hurt anything, but how much help is it gonna be? It takes a volume of organic matter and or manure to convert into a usable soil source, okay? And on these areas around here that burned, I would be dumping chips, manure, whatever I could, and try to get some bacteria going there again and get those back. you're about gonna have to mechanically remove that if you want to get
We
rid of
did
it.
1/2 acre with a skid steer and it worked real well.
Yeah.
And I
Have
mean,
something to
little
go back
pockets,
on.
and I love the eggs part. but that's
How did that
tough.
soil look after the fire? Cause I don't think some of this.
I didn't
soil-
have the fire.
Oh, okay.
Well, no, I say I didn't, y'all may know, in there longer. but-
Well, there was an older fire that came through on some of it.
Yeah, it didn't look really devastating, but I guess at one point there was, because we've got a lot of locusts, a lot of scrub oak.
And that's,
That's
so
something
something's
good.
growing there,
Yeah.
okay? And
The
so
soil
even,
looks great.
I mean, I'm not, with the exception of rue or some of those other real bad ones we got, something growing there's better than nothing.
I'm still
And it
getting
lets you know the
earthworms.
soil's trying.
Yeah, I mean, if I lay a piece of cardboard on the ground, you can go out in a week and there's earthworms everywhere.
Oh,
So
good.
I've got
So we're
great
good.
soil.
So I would, after I work that, get you something out there, cover that, get your seed down and do it right before it starts raining. Is there much grade to it?
Yeah, I've got a pretty steep.
Okay, and so let's, real quickly, how much time do I got?
You have as much time as you want.
So a real common thing they're starting to do now, and I kinda like it, Santa Fe's always leading the edge on this stuff, because they're pretty cool at Santa Fe. But they take their hills, and we just do a little contour, right? Even if it's just a kind of a little berm or a ditch, and go up that hill. So they'll start here and they'll put this type of plant, they'll go up, build another little kind of terrace, and put this type of plant, and they work their way up that grade. And they pick things that you can, so they don't put their trees at the bottom, they put them up there at the top so they don't block the view of the others. But when they do that, they catch a lot of that runoff. Keep the water on your place as much as you can. And berms, contouring, vegetation help that. Driveway is not so much, huh? We all know how that works, right? So keep that there as much as you can, because as you remove some of this canopy where we need to, it's gonna come scooting down, guys. So we need something there to hold it. That's why I'll have them lay those logs down. Anything we can do. We're starting to do on private land, some of these head cuts that are getting bad on like Pennyasco and some of these other drainages, side drainages. We go in and we take this woven wire, and we make it about this high, and we drive some cheap T-posts in the ground, and then we put that water in it, and we throw some rocks and maybe just a trash catcher. So when we get a hard downpour, it comes running up to it, spills over, it goes on down. We catch some trash, and we're slowing down that cut. And that's what we need to do, because we've got some erosion going on up here that we need to get under control. And part of that is we're lacking some of our more desirables along our banks. And you know, they can point the finger at livestock all they want, but I'm telling you, our elk populations are huge. And elk are cool, don't get me wrong, I like them. But we've got numbers that unless we clear up the forest and get some more habitat for them, they're overgrazing. The elk are literally overgrazing. But wildlife biologists that count elk don't always know about how to manage it. I was fortunate, my dad was a range and wildlife biologist. And he left the fishing game because he wanted to manage the habitat more instead of the animal.
Our place doesn't have anything on it that anybody planted. It's just all
Okay,
natural.
all native.
How can you tell how big an area of a certain plant becomes a problem?
Well, I mean, it depends on the plant. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's an oak thicket, look, that'll hold that soil and be there, but it kind of renders it not so much, right? Sometimes we'll see wildlife ease through there and browse on that, but I mean, if you're okay with that, that's fine. It's what you want to tolerate. It's when we have dense stands of timber that have nothing growing under them that it's a problem. It's when that oak thicket gets up 10 feet high, solid, and nothing's growing underneath it. You want to mix. So that mix can be designed how you want it, but you also got to realize, so your question is, well, when do I know I got too much oak for the amount of rainfall I get? When it gets thick like that, you got too much. I like pockets, I like islands. Even on the rangeland, I like some thick cover. I want some savanna type trees just slightly scattered around. And then I want some big open meadows, grassland. And that won't be just grass. It'll be grasses and forbs and some small shrubs. 4-week saltbush, it's a shrub, wonderful feed. Winterfat, it's a shrub, it's wonderful feed. Okay? For wildlife and livestock, it's that mix. You want to mix. You know, so that's up to you, but you don't want so many trees that you don't have enough moisture for it, and you don't want no trees at all because you'd like a few trees for aesthetics, right?
Yeah, I'm married to a guy that just cries when you cut down a tree, so
Well,
we're having a real.
and so I get it. You don't know how critical that is. And think about this, folks. We're the jumping off place for Texas. Okay, we are. We're the closest national forest to Texas. Here, Rio Dosa, go on up the Front Range. But we are closer because we got the Panhandle, scenic Panhandle, right to our east. Right? It used to be my territory. I got lots of friends over there. But a lot of those folks come to the mountains for the trees and the cool air. And you can't blame them, right? I left Oklahoma. I was there 10 years. I said, I miss my mountains. I'm moving home. So I had to go to where the cattle were because there's not a whole lot in our part of the world. They want the trees, and the trees are pretty. But if you don't know the history of, I mean, they get more rain in the Panhandle than we do in a lot of areas up here, guys, and it's pretty dry. So unless you know that history and that balance, and I tell folks like your husband this, I say, look, pick some good trees you really like that aren't a hazard to your house. If you get rid of some of that stuff around, and that tree will look so much better. How often do you see like trees growing up side by side each other or whatever, or you get a young spruce trying to grow up, they never look good. They won't be the trees in the postcard. They'll never make it. So open that up, keep the healthy trees looking good, and get some other stuff growing there. Right, porcupines. That's it. Deer, elk, antelope, cattle, sheep, nothing eats a tree, a pine tree. Right? Now they'll eat on some oak, and they'll eat on some other species, but nothing eats those conifers other than porcupines. So we couldn't have even wildlife if we had nothing but trees. You know? Okay, anything else? Well, it's been great. Does anybody here? I'm here for the day because I'm going to a 4-H meeting tonight, so I'm going to hang out and see timber on. If you had some questions or wanted me to come look at your place, it would save me another trip. Absolutely, we'll do it. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.